Whenever I'm doing street photography, I tend to be mindful of the gear I carry around due to wanting to be as discreet as possible and paying attention to the amount of weight I have to carry. Because of that, I found ways to avoid bringing my tripod as much as possible. But sometimes you have to bring your tripod, especially for shots like long exposures of cityscapes. In this video, I'll discuss some tips that may help you when doing long exposures on the street with and without your tripod. Handheld long exposures. When doing handheld long exposures, you want to be as still as possible, as a little shake will affect your final photo drastically. This gets more true the longer the shutter is open for. Because of this, we need to find ways to try to keep as still as possible. One thing I tend to look for when doing handheld long exposures are surfaces around me I'm able to use to help keep still, such as walls, rails, and even the floor if I'm able to keep the composition as I want it. This lets me lean my body or my camera on a surface, letting me keep still for even longer and getting away with not having to bring my tripod with me for photo walks. Now for certain situations, I'm unable to have my camera on the floor or lean my body against a large surface to help me keep steady, like this photo I took here in a convention. What then? This is when you have to resort to some techniques we can use ourselves to help steady our camera. To remain as steady as possible, we want to keep our camera as close to our bodies as possible. The more your camera is further away from your body, the more your arms will shake to try and support the weight, which leads to a shaky photo. Along with that, I keep my stance wide to be as balanced as I can. If your feet are too close together, your balance will be thrown off, leading to shaky photos. Finally, we get into our breathing. Now you may think, well, what does our breathing have to do with our steadiness? When we breathe, there are periods when we are the most stable, which can be seen when shooting an arrow or even shooting a free throw in basketball. Contrary to popular belief, it actually isn't when we hold our breath, which I used to actually do a lot. But after switching to shooting when exhaling, I found it much easier and also much more comfortable. Using objects around you. While walking around the city, you'll see so many random objects that may be helpful to us to help stabilize our camera. But the most helpful thing may actually be what we carry with us. If I can stabilize my camera safely on a flat surface, I like to actually use these Peak Design straps that I have strapped on my camera right here. I use these to actually balance the camera on the floor. This way I can get away with getting long exposures without having to worry about my camera shaking or bringing my tripod. But really, just being creative with objects you have around you may help you get some long exposure shots in certain areas. One time I even put my camera in my shoe to help stabilize my camera on the floor and get a shot of the Tokyo Tower. Mini tripod. This requires you to have one of these mini tripods here. This is a relatively cheap one at around $20 or so. When I first bought it, I found it a bit useless, as I never really found myself using it. However, after bringing it around with me during my travels, I figured out how handy a small tripod really is. There are situations where you might not be able to bring your main tripod, or you may not want to carry your main tripod around. Whatever the case is, having a small tripod as a substitute has its uses. With this tripod, there is no slit, making it only possible to take pictures in landscape orientation. I have a specific technique that I found most helpful with this specific small tripod for getting your shots in portrait orientation. Though I'm sure there are some other small tripods out there on the market that may make this process easier, but this is for this specific Manfrotto small mini tripod. First, you need to find a ledge or so with enough space for your camera as well as a small tripod to go on. If you are taking a photo in landscape orientation, it's pretty self-explanatory. You just set it up. You just put your camera on the tripod and you're set. What I do for photos in portrait orientation though, is I actually lay the camera's side on the ledge itself and flip the tripod over on its side. With a camera like this, I then open two of the tripod's legs. With the tripod's legs out, I can lay them out on the floor and have that stabilize the camera on its side. To be on the cautious side, I like to keep my wrist strap attached to the camera still, just in case it falls or something, especially when it's really windy. Standard tripod. Every tripod is different, so I'm really just speaking from my experience. But when using my tripod in the city, personally for me, I find it a bit troublesome sometimes, as not only are sidewalks very narrow from time to time, but I'd rather not block people's ways just to get a photo. That just doesn't sit well with me. To prevent that, I found a bit of a solution that works in most cases I've found. With most sidewalks, there is some type of handrail or something similar. I like to use two legs of the tripod and lean them on the railing with the third leg on the floor. With a tripod like this, I find that not only is it a bit easier to set up and put away, but I don't have to actually take up the whole sidewalk just because I want a photo. It makes me feel less bad, leading me to take my tripod out a bit more often and being able to get more long exposures of the city I'm taking photos in. When going out, I'm pretty conscious of the gear I bring to make sure I can get the shots I want for that particular shoot. but also to avoid bringing too much as that can get in the way of the actual photography process. I hope these tips help give you some ideas so you can go out and take some long exposures in your own city. Until next time.